does. Okay, perfect. We are live now, and the FPL has started. The FPL fever has started, and we thought we'll do one stream primarily on the forward side. I think after a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, Kane has departed. A lot of old guys have gone out. Wadi has just come back into the game, but the forward game looks really, really interesting. And with that, we wanted to bring in a new guest this week, and we have Kanji FPL joining us from Toronto, Canada. How are you doing, mate?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing well as.
Thanks for having me.
No worries. How are things for you. I understand it's a long weekend there.
It is, yeah, it's really nice. A lot of my friends are at their cottage enjoying some life, but I don't mind spending some time and chatting some FPL anytime, bro.
Amazing, amazing. And things have started really well for Liverpool. I see you just beaten Manchester United 3-0. How does it feel?
It feels amazing, whenever you can get like one up on your rivals. But I mean, the lineups weren't that great. Like even for Liverpool, we were missing like Darwin, Diaz, Gakpo, Trent, Van Dyke, and even for Man U, they're missing a lot of key players as well. But it's always nice to get a win.
Definitely, and I saw you guys, beat Arsenal as well, and I think the team looks really good, right? There's some pattern of plays which are already emerging. So, one of my friends, Srini, who's from US and is a huge Liverpool fan, he's already been singing, Arne Slot, la 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 la.
Yeah, you know what? Like, I was thinking, like, after Klopp was leaving and then the new manager would come in, I thought there would be a potential downturn, but it looks like we're playing really great. I know it's just preseason and these games don't matter, but the tactics have been great. We've been playing like a double pivot. I think we're giving a lot of freedom to players like the wing backs as well as Salah to go out there and create. They've been playing with the 10 as well. So if we're able to pick the 10 for Liverpool, that could be a really good differential. So lots to discuss.
Perfect, perfect. And before we jump in, right, and I'm sure we'll end this episode with your draft, but how are you feeling with your draft? Are you comfortable settling in now?
Oh man, like every day that goes by, I wonder like, can I find a way to bring Holland in? Like, did you see like the hat trick he had yesterday versus Chelsea?
I did, I did. I wasn't expecting him to start even.
Yeah, man, 3 goals was unreal. But he was kind of gifted 2 goals to be honest, like two mistakes. But that's what happens. He's always in the positions to kill you, right? So that's the thing. But yeah, for now I'm feeling really comfortable. I actually went to bed. I put Holland in. I woke up. I took him right back out. Like it just didn't feel right to me. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that's the season beginning. Right? I mean pre-season drafts, right? You always
Mhm.
get that temptation the moment a highly owned player scores. I'm sure there are itchy days ahead of you, especially community shield and later, right? And
Exactly.
with that, I think we'll start this season. Like I was talking about, this season feels different for the forwards, right? It seems like we have good quality options across price ranges, and that's why we wanted to do a stream primarily for the forwards, right? Look at how things
Mhm.
are shaping up for from a people point of view, from the manager's point of view, and then also talk about right where we are with our choices, right? And with that, we have segregated this entire episode into three simple segments who are our first picks, right? The top three guys are Isaac, Watkins, and Haaland, price wise, and it seems like they're also the top first picks for all the FPL managers, right? Who are
Mm.
supporting actors, especially if you go with Haaland, you do need one supporting actor in your team, right, in your squad. I think primarily people with Haaland are at a 3-5-2, but I've also seen some 3-4-3 squads. People just manage to bring someone in, and then you have those final guys, right? The 6 million, 5.5 million guys who are addendums, who are fillers, who may not be our starting guys, but we
Mm.
do want them to chip in whenever we need them, right? So keeping things fairly simple now, right? And then we'll go on to see how things are looking from a ownership point of view, right? As of today, Isaac is leading the chart, 56% ownership. It reminds me of a couple of seasons back. I think Jesus had just come in for Arsenal and like 75, 76% ownership, right? Crazy, crazy. And Isaac has seen something similar already. If he scores a hat trick, you never know he reaches a similar number, in the preseason.
Yeah. I think in terms of the engaged community, people that are going to be on Twitter and following content, I think he's around like 95% owned. So pretty much you get no gains by owning him at this point of the season.
True, true. And then you have, he's followed by last year's top scorer, Watkins. He had a humongous season. I mean, unbelievable, the number of goals, the number of assists, right? After this, Haaland, right? So the most priced players are already there at the top, right? Haaland, surprisingly, is at 35.5. I think it was around 31, 32% yesterday. So there's a 3% rise. People who saw the hat trick and like you just went ahead and see, how can I get back him in. But unlike you, I think they have got him in. And then you have, Joao Pedro, who's really cheap, and I think is your Haalands. People who are on a Haaland plus Salah draft, they just don't have money to
Mm.
do anything else, right? So you have Joao Pedro at 18%, Kai Havertz, Tony, Solanke, and so on, right? The list goes on. And on
There's a
the
lot
right,
of like good
yeah,
8.0 mids, like the bracket of like Havertz, Tony, Solanke, Mateta, Darwin, Gakpo. There's some good options at that price point, but they all come with risks. Like, is Havertz a potential rotation risk? Is Darwin Gakpo a potential rotation risk? And Mateta is also at the Olympics, so he'll potentially miss the first game. And Solanke, there's rumors of him potentially making way to Tottenham, actually. So at least that's what we're getting from reliable sources. So just some things to keep an eye on.
definitely, definitely. And on the right side, we have people with less than 7% ownership, and you have, old foe, Jimmy Vardy, 6.2% ownership already at 5.5 million. I don't know whether he starts for Leicester anymore, but it
Mm,
was just good to see his name there, as someone who's been playing
mm.
FPL for a few years, right?
Nostalgic vibes.
Nostalgic, right? And then you have Muniz Holland from United, who seems injured and might miss the first few weeks. And, fan favorite Chris Wood, right? I think the Twitter community really loves Chris Wood, and he's
Yeah,
at
100%.
5%. And then you have, few of the other players going in, right? Any surprises so far from a ownership point of view?
I think it's always nice to have Wood in your squad. I think he'll always be like a good option. I think, to me, I think Adam Armstrong is the one that really stands out. But once we get to that point, then we'll get to my drafts. He's actually in it. So of the cheaper ones, he's the one I have my eye on. But Hoyland just picked up an injury in preseason. But I think Wood will have high effective ownership given how easy the Nottingham Forest fixtures are to start the season.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure once people start, a lot of this might be set and forget draft, right? People come in just after around the community seal and start playing around with the drafts. So you might
100%.
see some changes here and there, right? And we start with the fixture ticker, right? Just to see who are the favorites or what things are looking. This is primarily a scout, right? Scout, and it's sorted by difficulty, not relative difficulty, simple difficulty, right? For the first six fixtures, and we do have Fulham at the top. Right, interesting. And then second we have Liverpool, right? And that's where a lot of
Mm,
people are starting with Mo Salah, sitting on Mo Salah, especially for the first week. Ipswich away. From what I read, I think Mo Salah has always scored in the first game week of
yeah,
season since
every
he's
single game in every
every
league.
single
Yeah.
game. Right, so crazy stat, right? So you can hardly go wrong, and especially when it comes to championship squad side, he's really really tricky. Right, a great captaincy choice. And then you have the likes of Everton, Southampton, United, Palace, right? The top
Wow.
guys are slightly below. I was expecting to see Newcastle a bit higher, but I think
Mm,
City match away at home skewed it up for them,
yeah, exactly.
right? Similarly, you have Chelsea, Arsenal, and City are there right at the second bottom, which I found interesting. But it's City, right? Even if they start slow,
Wow.
they are going to score goals even in those toughest matches, right?
Mhm.
With that, we won't delay any further, and I think we'll get down to the first slide that we have, right? It's about Haaland, right? Erling Haaland is the most expensive FPL player ever now at 15
Unbelievable.
billion.
15.0? What the heck?
When I saw it, I couldn't believe it either. But one thing that came to my mind is, it's good, right? They have made put him at a price where you need to make sacrifices. Till last season, it was just easier. I mean, you could still find ways to have, Haaland, Salah, Saka, 3, 4 top players of the game, and play it. This time they have made it difficult, because if you are giving him 15 million of your squad, you are scraping the bottom for sure for some of the positions, right?
Mhm. What's interesting with Holland is that, like, he picked up 31 XGI last year, and then he also picked up 31 XGI in the season before that. But his goals, like the difference between them in the seasons is drastic. Like he picked up 27 last year and he picked up 36 the season before that. So he underperformed this year and he overperformed in his debut season. So which Holland are we gonna get?
Exactly, and I was just looking at the goal threat, right, just to see how the numbers look. I was extremely amazed to see the number of greens which are there on the left. So left hand side we have, the 2023 numbers, and on the right side we have 2022 numbers. And if you see the sea of greens when it comes to goal attempts, right,
Wow.
headed, blocked, shot on target, big chances he received, uh, you know big chances scored is the only place where we see, a bit of shift, right? And I guess that was what was missing, right? Very
Mm,
difficult to think it will be again something similar for Haaland,
mm,
missing those big chances, etc. I think, given the fact that he's had a very much empty preseason, right? He didn't go to the Euros. He was just chilling,
mm.
eating, doing whatever he does, right?
A rest in
Preparing for the
Holland.
season.
Oh man.
Right. So, and I've seen your draft. You are, like you spoke about, you're going about without Haaland, right? Why?
I guess we'll get there when we talk about my draft, but
Yeah.
initial thoughts are that, like, it's we just saw the ticker originally. Over the first 6 weeks, Man City are at the bottom of the ticker. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm expecting Holland to get a return every single week. He's
Yeah.
probably more explosive than Salah, but I just think that he can still give you like Holland's still going to return every week. But I think that you're able to just get Salah as a better value pick, and you're able to spread an extra 2.5 million across your squad in the beginning part of the season. I think over
Yeah.
the course of the season, like Holland will never be a good value pick. You get the value from
Of
captaining
course.
him, right? Because you can
Yeah.
get two of him. And
Yeah.
I think when we're looking at the data, like it just kind of stands out. Like the goal attempts are all up. Everything is up. Like more shots on target, more block shots, more goal attempts in the box. Everything is up in the most recent year. It's
Yeah.
just the conversion rate that's down from
Yeah.
33% to 28%. So, and even his shot accuracy. So he's getting more shots on target. He just didn't finish them. So it's one of those things where you just really have to monitor his finishing. And if he's performing at that elite level where he's finishing everything, you have to have him. But if he's not, then I think being priced at 15.0, you can potentially go against him. So that's why for me, I'm looking to avoid in the beginning and just want to monitor to see how his conversion rate is looking in the beginning part of the season.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Right. And that's why, despite the fact that he's had a pretty much, empty, no Euros, etc., he's very well rested. The, we see him third highest on the ownership, right? He's not the highest this time, unlike last time. And with that, we'll
Mhm.
go on to the next slide, right? These are the guys who are the top two when it comes to, most on for forwards. On the left, we have Watkins, who had a, I mean, amazing, outstanding year last season, and he did go to the Euros, but I don't think he played as much. Right, scored a fantastic winner for England, and apart from that, nothing much to remember. And if you're
Mm,
looking at the guy on the right, Isaac, again, like Haaland, he comes in really well rested. They do have, I think, the first three fixtures look really good for Newcastle, and slowly it maybe with us out, but he had amazing season last year as well, right? Uh,
mm. And like the data here, is this like per 90 data or is it like per start or per appearance?
Yeah, so these are all per appearance numbers, because Scout gives us an option to pick up the data per appearance, right?
Okay.
So just looking at the data per appearance, I was really surprised, right? I expected Watkins to stand out in most of the things, but I think Isaac holds his own in a lot of things there, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I think with Isak, he's just great in terms of goal conversion. He's great in terms of getting his shots on target. And I think one of the interesting stats about Isak is that he has the highest baseline bonus of any striker in the game. So whenever he gets a return, he's the striker most likely to pick up bonus points. And I think with Isak being priced 0.5 cheaper than Watkins, I mean, I kind of think they're on the same level, really, because I think Isak is probably slightly better per 90, but then he's also has more injury risk. So I guess that's why they priced him slightly cheaper. But the way I'm thinking about it is that if I can save the point 0.5, I'd rather just get the guy that's 100% on the penalties. For me, the absolute game changing piece of information is to understand if Watkins is on the pens. Because if he is, he's the type of asset you would like to set and forget for the season, right?
Definitely, definitely. Uh, that's something that we all have our eyes on. And I was just looking at last season stats again for Watkins. Isak had 20.3 xg and he scored 21 goals. So more or less he utilized what he got. Watkins xg was lower. He had around 17 xg, right, 16.88, and he scored way more goals, right? He scored around 19 goals. But what surprised me was he had around 4.16 xa, right, an xa of 4 to 5, and he got 13 assists out of it, and even 5 more FPL assists, right? You know those
Rebound
penalties,
goals.
etc., right? The extra ones, right? That you receive, right?
Mhm.
So he got 18 FPL assists out of just 4.13 XA, right? And you just have to think, yeah, XC might be, he is a great finisher. He'll continue in his top form. His confidence is high. He'll continue finishing the same way. But XA, will that continue to be this high?
Oh, 100%. That really stands out in terms of like regression to the mean. I probably expect him to decrease the amount of assists that he had last year. It felt almost as if like every cutback that he pulled to the top of the box, it was McGinn or Douglas Luiz banging them in every time. But I'm just not sure how consistent you can rely on
Yeah,
Watkins for that. And that's
yeah,
why I think having the point 0.5 price savings, especially given how much Watkins has overperformed from his XA, I think it just makes sense to be on Isak over him. But I want to caveat this with as soon as we hear that Watkins is on the pens, you have to change your entire structure and bring Watkins in. Like he's just the obvious player to own because then he'll pick up 25 goals from a striker position and probably get at least 6 or 7 assists. So you're looking at someone that's going to give you at least 30 plus returns, and he's only priced at what 9.0. So he's probably going to be better value than any of the premium mids, especially given the fact he'll be really good on bonus as well. Like
yeah,
both of these players are great picks in their own rights. As long as they stay fit, I think both of them are averaging over 5 points per match. So I don't really mind even starting with both of them in like a three premium structure, going for like a Isak Watkins plus Holland if that's the way that you want to think, and go for cheapies in midfield too.
yeah. I makes sense. And when we're talking about BPS, I do remember there was a pod, and I was just checking. I think Baker, they do a lot of analysis around bonus points, right? I think Watkins underperformed his bonus, or with the new rules, he can score, I think, another 9 or 10 points with the change of rules to his bonus,
Wow.
which is crazy, right? He ended it this high, and he can even go higher. And like you spoke about penalties, with Douglas Luiz going to Juventus, there's a good chance that Watkins pick up some of these penalties. And if it does, the ceiling is crazy high, extremely high. But I want to add one more caveat here. He does go to Champions League this season, right?
Mm,
So he has to play a lot more matches. He has to play midweek matches, and Isaac doesn't have it, right? So obviously
mm.
both are standout options, but you just have to observe how things start for them. Isaac well rested. I think the fixtures are looking good at the beginning, and I guess now I understand why he's 56% owned. I myself
Yeah.
own. I'm
Yeah,
not.
like in the elite managers, he's 100% owned. Like essentially, in order to get like points from Newcastle, you've got to own a Gordon or you've got to captain Isak because his points don't matter basically.
Amazing. So we have had a good discussion on who our first picks are, right? I think almost all the managers who play this season will start with one of these three, right, as the first pick in the
100%.
pod. 100%, right? And then we'll move on to the next set of people, and which I found interesting, right? Because when we're talking about the 7.5 million, the 8 million and below price bracket, we spoke about a lot of good options, but these two guys, stood out for me: Kai Havertz and Dominic Solanke. Solanke, like I think Watkins, Isaac, he had a great season last year, and I think he's settling well under this new coach. Right, this coach has finally found a way to get the best out of Solanke, right? And similarly, Kai Havertz, he moved to Arsenal last season. Right, he played as midfielder, left center midfielder, I think, for half the season. And when
Mm,
we made that switch where Kai moved back to the number 9 slot, I think he exploded. And just to add, I have picked up Kai's numbers only for the second half of the season, right, where he played as a number 9 for a like to like comparison. So these are again, per appearance numbers, but for Kai, it's only when he started playing as number 9, so that we have a
okay,
better understanding of how the numbers look, right?
interesting.
So how does the stats look for you, initially?
I think Havertz, when we get to the halfway point of the season, felt like a completely different player. I think like he really found his feet in the system, and I think if we get that type of Havertz, man, the league is gonna be scared of what Arsenal's potential is because he does feel like he could potentially be the new talisman for Arsenal. At times, I felt he was more involved than Saka was, but of course, Saka is a midfielder. He gets the clean sheet points. He's also on the penalties, but Havertz felt like he was involved in everything Arsenal were doing. So I think in order to really enjoy Arsenal attacking points, I think you've got to have both Havertz and Saka just from a stylistic perspective. But in terms of Havertz versus Solanke, to me, it just comes down to the rotation risk, right? So I just want to imagine that Solanke is going to be at Bournemouth still, right? So if
Yeah,
I'm thinking about Havertz, let's say there's some risk in terms of him maybe being benched for 3 or 4 games, potentially with Jesus getting some starts in some of the easier games. Um, and I'm not sure how 100% nailed he is. It would be my only concern. I think in terms of the returns, I think he'll do fine. Over the course of the season last year, he picked up around 16.6 underlying expected goal involvements, which is really low, versus Solanke, who picked up 21.6. And he had 19 XG, which is comparable to the Watkins and Isaks of the world. So I think Solanke probably has better data, but that's just because he was the striker for the whole season, right? So if we took Havertz's data in the second half, multiplied it by 2, I'm sure it'd be very comparable to Solanke. So it
yeah,
just really depends on like the way that you see Arsenal. I think for me, I have more question marks over his conversion rate. And I know you didn't include that here, but
this is fair.
I just felt
Yeah,
like if Arsenal win the league, it's because Havertz puts all of his chances away. Because when Man City have somebody like Holland up top, you can rely on him to score the goals. But with Havertz, there's more question marks over that skill specifically for him. I think his link-up play is incredible. The way he can pass, the way he can dribble, he's strong. He can even win aerial duels. He's taller and quicker, like deceptively quick as well. So
yeah, yeah.
to me, I just have question marks over the finishing personally.
Definitely. And I took a look at, the numbers, how it looked when Kai was playing as a striker. Generally, I've seen is, Kai had a XG of around zero point 0.4 and a XA of zero point 0.2. And so XG plus XA of zero point 0.6. Dominic Solanke
Wow.
had a XG of zero point 0.5 and a XA of zero point 0.1. Right? So he still received better chances. But what I saw is both scored around zero point 0.5 goals per match they were involved in as a striker.
Wow.
Right, so it was fairly neck and neck, right? The only good thing that I like about Kai, and I'm an Arsenal fan, right? And I completely agree with you. There's always an underlying threat of, Jesus has now looks he's fitter. Right, last season he struggled a lot with his knee injury. He
Mm,
comes in really raring to go. He looks really good. While Kai might start as a number 9, you cannot be sure over the next 5 or 6 matches. There can be matches where, Jesus just comes in and starts, right? And Kai came in later, because he was involved in the Euros. But what I like is Kai is involved or is a striker for a team that will score 80 plus goals a season, right?
mm,
Bournemouth, Solanke doesn't. But I'm looking at the Solanke to Tottenham rumors because I feel he fits them really, really well. And if he moves, yeah, there might be some settling in period for sure, right? But over the course of a season, I think we will see a more explosive Solanke, right?
mm.
Someone whose ceiling will definitely increase because again, he'll play now for a team who will score 75 to 80 goals, right, this season, right? So that's something that, in my mind, is something to look at. There are question marks both ways, and that's why I guess that price also, a bit more fair, right? 8 million, 7.5 million. So you can take those question marks and still play with it, right?
Yeah, I think for me, if Solanke stays at Bournemouth, I would prefer him, and I would bank the extra point 0.5 and spend it across my squad. Like originally, I know we'll look at my draft later, but when I was looking to go against Holland, Solanke was actually the striker I was going to go with. I just think he has really good data. Like 19 xG is incredible. That's better than only the only players better than him would be Watkins and Isak and Holland, of course. So I just think at 7.5 he's good value. But if he moves to Spurs, do you think Solanke would become a better pick or a worse pick in FPL?
I feel he'll become a better pick because last year Spurs struggled a lot with the striker, right?
Mm,
Because Richarlison was not playing well. They experimented with Son, playing as number nine, which didn't really work in most matches, right? So it's a fairly attacking squad, and they do create a lot of chances, a lot of big chances, right? And Solanke should be able to score. And I feel on the con of Solanke at Bournemouth was he was always at the end of scoring goals. He was rarely created any for his because no one else was there to finish. But the good part about Spurs move is he has the ability to create. He's a fairly decent passer, and I think once he moves to maybe if he moves to Spurs, I think that extra element comes up in his game, right, where we'll start seeing way more assists out of him and way more FPL points because of his chance creation. He can pass to Son, he can pass to Kulusevski or even Brennan Johnson, right? All of these guys, right? So the unpredictability around Spurs will increase, and I think Solanke will benefit out of it, perhaps.
yeah, 100%. I think Spurs really lacked a number nine because whenever they play against a low block, if Richarlison wasn't there, they would say it was tough for them to really score because Son's not really like a number nine unless you're playing like a very fluid system when anyone can just play striker, anyone can be on the wing. But other than that, like it's tough for them. And even in preseason, they've been playing Kulisevsky, and Kulisevsky is like a pass first type of player, which works well for Son because Son is one of the most elite finishers in world football, not alone just the Premier League. Like he's a better chance finisher than Holland. So like having somebody like that to pass to for Solanke would be incredible. So I think he'd easily pick up 5 assists, probably just straight to Son. I'm sure a couple to Brennan Johnson, to Kulu, whoever's on the right. And I think you're probably right. He'd get more chances with Spurs. I just think if Richarlison's there, maybe the minutes won't be as strong, right? And then there would be more rotation risk, similar to like the Havertz versus Jesus, and as well as like Darwin versus Gakpo. So that's why, to me, I think if he goes to Spurs, I'll probably shy away and I won't go to him. But if he stays at Bournemouth, man, I think I might even start the season with him. But because of the rumors, I think he's just an avoid for me for now.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And with that, we'll go to the last segment of strikers that we have been looking at, which is 5.5, 6 million guys. We have Chris Wood, we have Joao Pedro, we have Rodrigo Muniz, who actually had a fantastic second half of the season. He really helped Fulham, pick up those points towards the end of the season. I was thinking of doing a Muniz versus Wood, but Joao Pedro's ownership is around 17%, which is crazy, crazy high, right?
Mm.
And that made me feel, let's just take a look at the numbers for these two guys, right, to see how things are, right? Because Joe Pedro
Mhm.
definitely plays for a more attacking squad, though we don't know anything about the new manager and how his play will be, how Pedro settles in into the new
Mm.
style of new scheme of things, right? But
Exactly. That's the issue with him is like expected minutes. You don't know how many to give him. You'd assume he'd be first in the pecking order, especially with Pascal Gross leaving. He would be the number nine. That would also be on penalties as well. He's definitely better than Welbeck, and with them being out of Europe and with the Zerbi gone, I think the rotation risk would decrease for somebody like Pedro. But because they have so many options, even a youngster who's 19 years old and Evan Ferguson, we've already seen him pick up a hat trick last year. The season before that, he lit up the league with goals. He has a lot of potential. So I think there is minutes risks with Pedro, but I think he plays probably for the better attack. You'd assume with Brighton, with players like Mitoma, March. They also bought this guy from the Dutch league as well in Minta, who's a great player. So there's a lot of attacking quality, and I think they're going to need a number nine to finish the chances. So I think Pedro being zero point 0.5 cheaper is probably just a really good pick relative to Muniz. But I think Muniz had a breakout season last year, right? He picked up an underlying data set of 9.6 in 1,600 minutes. So you'd assume that if he's the first choice number nine, he'd probably pick up at least 2,500 minutes. So you could at least 1.5 times his data and assume 15 underlying XGI. And I think That's really strong for somebody that's only priced at 6.0 as well. So they both could be good value picks. I'm not sure who I would pick. Who would you pick of these two?
Yeah, I understand why people are high on Pedro, right? Because I think towards the end of the season he was playing really well. The main challenge was, like you spoke about, X minutes, which is primarily, I think, De Zerbi, playing around, and I think he focused a lot in Europa compared to Premier League last season, which led to the kind of situation where he was sacked or asked to leave, right? Uh, with Muniz, I think you understand what you get, and that's important when you're going to this segment, right? You want to go for a player who's available when you want him, right? Because there might be weeks where some ex player doesn't play, especially start of the season, and you don't want that first bench guy to come off the bench and give you 1 pointer. You
Mm,
a 2 pointer, 3 pointer at the very minimum, right? And this one thing that I want to see how it plays out. Right, Fulham just got Emily Smith Rowe, who moved there from Arsenal. Fairly good lad, really strong, changes the attack a bit, and there are in strong talks with United to get Scott McTominay, right? And both Scott as well as Smith Rowe are not creator. They are generally people who run into the box a bit late and score. They are more of scorers
mhm,
than creators, right? So while people are thinking, or people are assuming, this might lead to higher chance creation, etc., for Moniz, I
mhm.
want to sit back and see how it plays out, that entire relationship with two new elements being added to the entire thing, right? I'm sure Fulham also have some sort of settling down period with this new attack. Right? That's something that I want to see. Maybe it plays out well. Maybe Smith Rowe and Mooney's connect really well. The attack becomes a bit more unpredictable, which helps Mooney's. But I want to see it out a bit more.
Yeah, I think with more added quality in the squad, you'd assume that there would be more creativity for Muniz though. So I think adding somebody like Smith Rowe it's only going to benefit him. I think McTominay, we've seen him always pop up with lots of good clutch goals for Man United. So
Yeah,
and he's really important for Scotland too. So I think regardless of like what's going on around him, I think he is just a good pick at 6.0. You really can't go wrong. The fixtures for Fulham to start the season are gorgeous. They play against Man United, and Man United were very poor defensively last year. I'm probably assuming they'll score. Someone will definitely be involved between him or Smith Rowe or Andreas, one of them. And then they go into the next two games against newly promoted teams. So I think definitely as a punt to start the season, like if you're looking for an early wild card, I think Muniz really fits the bill, him and Chris Wood. So it's really hard to really pick between these cheaper players. In fact, like Let's Talk FPL just released a video in terms of looking at the ownership of the elite managers, and Wood is at 18% owned, Joao Pedro's at 10% owned, Muniz is at 18% owned. So there is lots of ownership in this price bracket in particular. But personally, I'm just going to favor the penalty taker in Joao Pedro, priced at 5.5, just specifically because he's on pens. His minutes may be more questionable, but you can just save the money. And like, how often do you find there's like a penalty taker that just gets like 4 or 5 penalties and then picks up another 3 or 4 goals from open play? And then they just become such a good value pick where you could have just owned them over the course of the whole season and you're regretting it. Kind of like what Carlton Morris did for Luton. He picked up like 130 points last year, 140 points, and you're like, wow, price at 5.5. I could have just owned him the whole year. So it really just depends how you look at this price bracket, but I just think the fact that Pedro's on the pens for certainty, that I think that just elevates him slightly above the other picks in this bracket.
definitely. But just want to add, we did see Fulham at the top of the ticker when it comes to attacking, fixtures for the first 6 weeks, right?
Oh
So
yeah,
that's one
oh
more
yeah.
cap, right?
If you go short term, I think you go Muniz, but I think if you think longer term, I think you go draw Pedro.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I completely agree. Right. And with that, I think we have been talking about your draft a fair bit during our conversation. So without further delay, let's just take a look at how things are shaping up for you.
Oh wow. Okay, I've been waiting for this moment. I can't lie. So I've decided to go for a only Salah structure. So I know people are going to look at this squad and say, what the heck? There's no 15.0 Norwegian robot up top. But even after the hat trick against Chelsea, I have decided to just stay firm in my conviction. And I think I have a lot of underlying assumptions with this draft, and I think it's important we'll break it down. Isak, I think, is just he's a no-brainer given the early like the fixtures to start the season. I think he's just the best striker to own. Then I decided to go with two value strikers to pair alongside him. Originally, I had Solanke in this position, but because of the rumors and the uncertainty there, I decided to go down to a João Pedro. Armstrong priced at 5.5 just feels like the best value pick in the game for me. I think when you're looking at the 5.5 midfielders, it's hard to pick between them. You have like Smith Rowe, even somebody like Harvey Elliott was getting great minutes and great positions for Liverpool. Like there's lots of different options you can go for at the 5.5 price bracket in midfield, but none of them that really stand out to me. So if I had to spend 5.5, I'd rather do it on a striker. So that's why I have Armstrong there, even though he plays for Southampton. But of the newly promoted teams, Southampton are the most likely to stay to not get relegated according to the bookies. So that's why I've decided to go for Armstrong. I think 90 minutes on penalties, can't go wrong. João Pedro does feel like the biggest punt in my squad, but because my forward line is so cheap, I'm able to have such a stacked midfield and defense. It's unreal. I think when I compare my team to the Holland teams, I think I just have a more balanced squad. And I think when we're looking at captaincy over the first 6 weeks, you're probably, from my perspective, I'm going to be captaining Salah every week, except for game week 3, where he goes away to Old Trafford. And that's where I would likely captain Saka at home to Brighton or Isak at home to Spurs, where I would trust both of those players to get at least one return. So over the first 6 weeks, I'm very comfortable captaining Salah. Best fixtures, we saw the ticker earlier. So that's why I've got Salah in my team. No brainer. Now, I know Salah is not as explosive, and there's a chance that Holland can still outscore Salah, even given the fact he has tougher fixtures. But he's 2.5 more expensive. And people that go for Holland forget to talk about what they can do with the extra 2.5. And for me, that would be upgrading a 4.5 defender to a Vardiol in my defense and upgrading a 4.5 keeper into a David Raya. So we'll get to my defense later on, but I just think Salah is a lock, at least for me, given how good the fixtures are. And you can't really pick any of the other attackers in terms of nailed minutes. Saka being priced at 10.0 does feel like a little bit undervalued. I think he's really an 11.0 asset, given the fact that he's the 90-minute man on the penalties for a team that I'm expecting to be challenging for the title this year. I think a 15.0 difference between Saka and Holland, it's too big personally. Like Saka picked up 220 points last year. He had 6 penalties, but Arsenal had 10, meaning that he gave away 4 penalties. And Arsenal haven't gone out into the transfer market to bring in someone to take minutes away from him. So I think that his minutes are nailed on. So that's why of the assets at 10.0, I think he has more historical consistency than somebody like Palmer. He's been doing this for the past 3 years versus Palmer that could be just a one season wonder. I'm not saying he is. I'm just saying it could be. So I think with Saka, he has a higher floor than Palmer. He even had better underlying data and he had less penalties than Palmer and he's zero point 0.5 cheaper. So even though Arsenal have more difficult fixtures to start the season, I think I'm just going to back Arsenal. I don't think they're going to win the league, but I think they're really fixture proof from an attacking perspective as well as a defensive perspective. So I really like that in terms of going for Saka as a differential. He's been 70% owned in the past like 3 years, right? Like it's hard to really get points and to enjoy them. So
Yeah.
for the first time in a long time, I can enjoy Bukayo Saka points. So I'm really looking forward to that. How do you feel about Saka versus Odegaard versus Havertz, bro?
So in my current draft, I actually have Odegaard, right, and it's primarily the because I have a Haaland, draft, right. So it's difficult to get Haaland and Saka, right, and create a good team. But one thing that I saw, again, I remember Baker's pod is Odegaard can get, I think, the maximum points because of the change in rule, and both Saka and Odegaard should ideally get around 30 bonus points, right? If with the change in rules, assuming that we play in a similar manner, right? So both are really strong assets. The difference in price is 1.5 million, and I think it's a slightly higher difference. It's because I was very surprised when I checked. Odegaard actually scored around 185 points last season, and he didn't have a great season, right? And I feel like
Mm.
Odegaard's last season was his floor, right? And right, so I expect him to be again a 200 pointer guy this season, right? Like Saka. Saka has back-to-back two season of 200 points, right? So I think he can do more. But like we spoke about penalties, I think Saka gave away a bit, especially at the start of the season, which then was stopped. And this that practice I expect him to continue. I think Saka continues to uh, take all his pens this season, like the second of last season, and he's definitely a 200 pointer guy in my eyes as well, right? So
Yeah,
he
it's not even
he's a good
200 point. I think he's a 250 point player personally. Like I
ceiling.
think if they don't go out into the market and buy someone that takes minutes away from him, like he just has to start every game. The issue is that like the replacement that comes in, the ceiling of like a Reece Nelson is lower than the floor of Bukayo Saka. So
Yeah,
like you're better off just playing a 70% version of Saka, even though he gets knocked and picks up bruises, and it's just
that
like
happens.
they need to go out into the market to take minutes away from him. If they don't, then I'm just keeping Saka all season. That's personally how I feel.
I agree. I think he's a great, just set and forget player. Unless he's injured, you just play him from game week 1 to 38. There's no reason to play around. And I agree with you. I feel like, Arsenal, Liverpool, City, these are fixture proof players. I don't look at fixtures when it comes to these teams. I think these are top quality teams. And again, I think this season as well, these will be the top three teams, right? How they end
Yeah,
up is something different, right? So I would love
yeah.
to load up as many players as I want between these three teams, right? And then
Exactly. Yeah,
distribute
the
it
thing
around.
is, it's hard to do that with Holland though, because he's 15.0, right? If you go for Salah, you get an extra 2.5 that you can spread. So that's why, again, I think people that have gone with Holland, they may cut corners and try to go for an Odegaard. But when I look at the fixtures coming up, they have like Man City, Aston Villa, as well as Spurs. I don't really think those are Odegaard fixtures in particular. I think Odegaard is an absolute bully to like teams that'll sit in the low block where he's able to be creative and unlock the defense. So I think that's why when I'm looking at the fixtures in particular, I knew immediately I don't want to be on Odegaard. So that's why I have Saka. So Saka plus Salah are really important to me. Eze does feel like the best pick in the game. Personally, I think price is 7.0. I would be paying 8.5 for him and not batting an eye. Given how well Palace were at the end of last season, I think they are so underrated. I know that they've lost Elise, who was incredible in the minutes that he played, but with him leaving, that guarantees Eze to be on the penalties, on the free kicks, on the corners, and defensively as well. When we looked at the data since Glasner came in, Crystal Palace were the fourth best defense in terms of expected goals conceded. So that's why you'll see somebody like Anderson in my defense. And that also means that Eze will pick up clean sheet points as well. I think going into the season without Eze is just a mistake, personally. That's just the way that I feel. I know that like the creativity of Elise like leaving could hamper the attacking threat of the entire team, but they've added somebody like Ismail Assar who has the pace. They added Kamada who has the creativity. So I think they'll be fine. So Eze is the absolute most nailed pick as well as Isak for me and my team. Moving on to Bruno, I
I
think
just have
he's the
one
most.
question for you,
Oh,
right? Because
go ahead, bro.
I
Sorry.
had is a in my draft, right? And off late, I have a tinkering feeling in my mind to move out of Heze, with just 0.5 million at the bank to someone like, Jota, right? Diego Jota, who seems like
Mm,
playing number nine,
I
right?
see.
Does that come in your mind?
Um, Honestly, if I'm being completely honest, no.
Hmm,
Because I think with Jota, you have like rotation risk. Because yes, he's the one that's there in preseason,
yeah,
but I think Jota is the type of player that you'll take on if you go for like a no Holland draft because you want access to those fixtures. I think it's good, but I think he's the type of player that there's rotation risk, but when he plays, he's one of the best midfielders to own. So
yeah,
I would want to say, yo, Jota is a great pick, but I think Eze is the most essential pick. Like I think he's the best pick in the game. I don't think you replace him with anyone. Essentially, to me, I think if he stays fit, I'll own him for the entire season. The reason I feel this way is because like he picked up 14 underlying, sorry, he picked up 15 underlying XGI in 2,000 minutes last year. And with Elise leaving, I'm assuming he'll play every single minute if he's not injured. So if he continues at the same rate, that means he'll pick up 21 underlying XGI in 3,000 minutes. And that's on par with Bruno Fernandes and Odegaard. So that's why I think Eze is the best pick in the game. If you go for a Jota, I think you do it alongside somebody like Eze rather than in replacement of him.
fair play, fair play. And we have Bruno and Cuckoo in your squad, right? What's the feeling there?
Yeah. Okay, so Bruno, I think, is just the most overlooked player in the league. I think well, I find a lot of people just disrespecting Manchester United. Given how poor that they played, they were closer to a mid-table team at times last season than they were to the top four. And I don't think it's I'm exaggerating at all. I think I'm just being honest and objective. But I
Yeah,
think with Bruno, he still picked up underlying expected goal involvements of 20. Like that's just how good Bruno is as a player. He's just one of the best midfielders in the league. So I think the thing with Bruno is that he picked up 166 points last year, but in another universe, he could have picked up 200, and I'll explain why. Because he had 166, he missed the penalty, so that's a 7 point swing, and he's so good on bonus, it's probably an extra 8 points if he had scored it. He gave two penalties away to Rashford, one at home to Everton, one away to Everton. So that would be an extra 12 points at least. So the 12 plus 8 would be 20. And then he also missed 3 games. So he usually averages at least 4 points per start. So it would be 20 plus another 12. And so that would be an extra 32 points. And he finished the season on 166. So in another universe, I could see him picking up 200 points. And with him being priced at 8.5, I just feel like he's very overlooked. I think a lot of people didn't really own him last year. So that's why they don't have any sort of affinity to him. And those that did own him last year were probably disappointed because you had somebody like Phil Foden priced at 7.5, cheaper than Bruno, who was the Premier League player of the season last year. You had somebody like Son, only zero point 0.5 higher than him, and he's a perennial golden boot contender. And then you had Saka, who was chasing the title, priced at 8.5. So why would you have really considered Bruno if you could go to those other alternatives, right? But with all of them going up in price, and then the biggest enabler in the game with Palmer disappearing, going up to 10.5, I think Bruno just represents really good value at 8.5. I'm not even a Man U fan. I'm a Liverpool fan, bro. But I still think that Bruno's a good pick, man. How do you feel about him? I think he'll really separate the community because at 8.5, I'm sure a lot of people will consider Odegaard, right?
yeah, yeah. I was between Bruno and Odegaard. I went for Odegaard, right? Primarily because I understand how we'll play, right? There's a bit of surety. Bruno's ceiling, we all know his ceiling, right? It's like 200, 220, or even more, right? It's just how Ten Hag uses him, right? I've heard a bit of good things from United fans. I think there are some tweaks in how United will play this season, and I think Bruno will get a much more freer role compared to last season. Last season they used him a lot to just spray those crosses in to Holland or whoever ends up there, right? I think it was just creating chance after chance, but all of those were small chances, right? His potential is higher as long as they are able to find him on the higher end of the pitch, right?
Mm.
And we have seen him to a good goal scorer as well. He's got really good finishing ability. So if United pick up well, I think Bruno, that 8.5 million price is nothing for him, right? So
Yeah, 100%. But they
he's
they
as
could
good
bounce
as
back,
good price.
but they could also just continue to be poor. I mean, how
Yep.
much do we really trust the manager and Ten Hag? I mean, I know they've picked up two trophies in the last 2 years, but when I watch them, I just don't know what their identity is. Like even when you watch Spurs, you watch Arsenal, you watch Liverpool, you understand their identity immediately. But
Yeah.
with Man United, I find myself always confused with what's going on.
With Ten Hag, they somehow spend so much time defending in their own half, right? I think it limits the attacking ceiling of their attacking players, and that's the reason I don't have Bruno in my draft currently. I'm more than happy to see something change and jump on him. Right, as of now, I don't have any of the United attackers, but I definitely have my eyes on them, right? Just to see how they develop, and if they look really good, I'll change my mind and jump on them.
Yeah. So I think Bruno, I think he's just very overlooked because I think we've been so spoiled for all the points we got from the other midfielders last season. So but it's one of those things where I think that is where I think my edge is like if you look at my team, I've put a lot of players that I think I could hold for almost the entire season if I wanted to. Like I could hold Eze, Saka, Bruno, I could hold Joao Pedro and Armstrong, I think, at their price points. I could own them all season if I wanted to. So what it does is it allows me to just spend my transfers on the premium positions and get to Holland, I think, around game week 7, right? Like on my last midfield spot, I've gone for Nkunku there at the 6.5 price point. I just think that's a mistake, bro. Like I understand that moving him from forward to midfield, but I think pricing him at 6.5 just feels wrong. Like I know this is weird, but in FIFA he's like an 85 overall player. Like last year it's like he just didn't play enough games. So what they did is they just decreased his price as if he became a worse player. But
Yeah,
that doesn't make sense to me. Like Nkunku is just so good. He has a great record in the Bundesliga. Of course, you want to include the Bundesliga tax, but he played well in the Champions League as well. So I just think Nkuku, it just feels like one of the best players at 6.5 that I think he stands out like a sore thumb personally. Like comparing him to a player like Gibbs White, yes, Gibbs White has better fixtures and on the penalties, but Nkuku is just genuinely the better player. So I think if the minutes are there, which they have been in preseason, 90 minutes in every single match, I mean, that tells you all you need to know. Like if the minutes are there with Nkunku, I'm there. But if he starts to get injured or the minutes start to decrease with the amount of depth and rotation, then I think, yeah, I would move away from Nkunku. But with them being in the Conference League, I think that'll just make them prioritize playing a backup team in the Conference League. If they were in the Champions League, then I would potentially consider not owning him and then just letting someone else have them as a differential. But I think they could play like somebody like Sterling and play some of the younger kids in like the Conference League. So I think Nkunku and Palmer will probably just be nailed to start in the league games.
Definitely. I mean, he's 17% owned today, as of today, and which is surprising. I think I agree with you. I feel like he's definitely, one of the best value picks that we have in the midfield option. And looking at the preseason, right, and I use preseason primarily from my education point of view, not as certainty how things will play out. But he's the guy who's playing as number nine. He's the guy making the runs, right? So if you have a Chelsea number nine, of course there's a new coach, and again, like United, they didn't have the best of seasons last year. But even then, even if they score 50 goals and you have a number nine guy playing as a midfielder in FPL at 6.5 million, you pick them up, right? It just makes sense, right? Again, feels like a set and forget kind of a asset, right?
Yeah.
Good punt to make.
Yeah, I definitely think he's a no-brainer, and I think he'll be the biggest hype train. I know he has a tough fixture with Man City, and then the fixtures after that are not like incredible. They don't have like a newly promoted team in there, but they still have good fixtures, and I think he'll get points. And I think of the other 6.5s, I'm not sure how much I trust them to haul, but it wouldn't surprise me to see Nkunku pick up some hauls and become a bandwagon once the season starts.
Yeah, one question for you, right? Because you are on a Bruno and Cuckoo, right, combo, right? The alternative to Nkuku is Rashford from United, right?
Mm.
And obviously the alternative for Bruno is Odegaard, right? 8.5 million, or even just Jota. Say you feel certain about his minutes, right, and you save some money here.
Mm.
Right? Would you consider those alternatives?
Uh, I think Bruno. I think I just have to be there with him. I just feel like Bruno and Eze are just the most locked players in my team. I don't think I've built a single draft without them. Like I think 90-minute men on the penalties, talisman. I can't go there. I also have like point 0.5 in the bank though with this draft, so I can upgrade an Nkunku to a Rashford or an
Hmm.
Mbumo if 20 leaves because Mbumo would be
Yeah,
on the penalties. So I just think this draft has so much depth, bro. Like when I've looked at other teams that have Holland plus Salah, I'm thinking about it like, bro, like you just don't have enough depth because you spend so much money in two spots and you can only captain one of them anyway. So I just think you have to go for one premium. And I could consider Rashford. Rashford's definitely on my watch list. He looked really sharp when I watched that Liverpool Man United game as well. He had like two or three shots, but they went slightly off target. But I also saw another preseason game. He was hobbling here and there, but there's an emergence of somebody like Amad Diallo, Garnacho, Rashford. So maybe Rashford could even get minutes in the striker position for Man U with Hoyland missing games. But I feel like Bruno will probably just play false nine. That's probably what I'm assuming. I think they'll play Bruno in a false nine or a Sancho maybe. So I don't
I
know. But I think those
played
guys are on my
Sancho
watch
against you
list,
guys,
but I'll,
right?
I'll start with Bruno.
They played Sancho in the match against Liverpool yesterday.
Hmm. Yeah.
Fair. With Ten Hag, right? That's the only thing, right? You don't know how bold he can be, but if it does go bold, if he just gives that freedom to these guys, we have FPL assets who can explode.
Yeah, they have great quality players. And the thing is with Rashford, it's like every other season he has a massive year where he becomes like one of the best players in the league, maybe even the world. Like, bro, I triple captain Rashford 2 years ago. Like, I know Holland was in the league, but I triple captain Rashford. He gave me 20 points. Like, he was a monster. Like, I was like 20 times three for 60. Like,
60.
bro, Rashford is just insane. Like, when he's in form, there's no one else in the league or the world that's like him. He's so direct and he's just so fast. And like with somebody like Bruno that he can play alongside, that's creative for him. Man, it's just Rashford could be a great pick. We just have to be patient, and that's why I think I like the luxury of having zero point 0.5 in the bank because I can upgrade my differential and Kunku spot to anyone.
Yeah.
But moving on to my defense, First of all, I gotta talk about Trent. Like Trent, for me, over the first 6 weeks, is the exact type of player I want to own. So like Eze, Trent, and Bruno have been in every single one of my drafts. I think people that go for Salah plus Holland, it's hard for them to afford a Trent. And I think in order to own Trent, he has to pass the eye test. So I think in August 11th, Liverpool are playing Sevilla in their last preseason match. But I've already seen Trent has joined up with the squad as well as like Van Dijk and everything. I've seen on Instagram already. So I'm going to be watching that game. If Trent plays in the right back position, which is where I think we all want to see Trent play, right? Because he can be creative and express himself. If he's there, I will be with this draft 100%. I think he is really the only question mark I have because like with Trent, he's been a 7.0, 7.5 price player, and he's been 100% effective ownership at these prices in previous seasons. Because like his potential is dramatic. Like, would it surprise you if he picked up, like 5 or 6 goals with 10 assists? No. And like Gertruda, who was like the right back in Feyenoord, which is like Arne Slot's previous team, he picked up underlying data of zero point 0.4 XGI per 90. So if Trent was in those positions, I wonder what he could have done. In fact, I'm seeing like Connor Bradley in preseason pick up incredible positions. Like his link up play with Salah is amazing. I mean, when you're playing with Salah, it's easy to have good link up play, right? So like he just gets into great positions. And I was just thinking, like, if that's Trent, the damage he will do in these spots would be incredible. And it's like similar to the way that Vardio was at the end of last season. Like Vardio just picked up these incredible positions for a defender that it just feels like a cheat code. So that's why I just think if Trent is in midfield in that last game, he's like gonna be for sure in my squad. I think he's the type of player that I think can break the template. Like I genuinely think if he starts off really well, like I think my team will do fine, and I don't think I have to worry too much about what Holland will do because I think owning Trent as my differential is that's kind of like I think his points will dictate how I do over the course of the beginning part of the season, but I'm very comfortable with it. Liverpool have great fixtures. He has access to clean sheets, access to assists on the set pieces, on the free kicks. I mean, we know how good Trent is, right?
One thing, a couple of things that I did notice, looking at Liverpool, both United as well as Arsenal matches, is two things that Slot general does. There's a lot of press baiting being done, right? You want the opposition to come in at you, and when the opposition comes in at you, you find some scope, some space. You put that ball over the top to someone like Salah, to run in, right? To turn his, go for those runs, right? Curved runs into towards the goalkeeper, right? So that does help Salah, right? But I was thinking, who's the best player to put that ball in, right? It's always Trent, right? So if he's there in some form of three-man defense, held back, then he's the guy who puts that ball into Salah for sure, or even a Jota, or even someone at the other wing. But the best part that I liked is, when you guys are attacking, you are there on the opposite side, right? There's a lot of inside runs being picked up by the fullback, right? You spoke about
Mm,
Bradley. Bradley keeps running inside. So even if Salah is there outside, pegged away, pinned away by a couple of players, right, marking her up, that Trent will be the guy who will be running inside towards the goal, right? So
mm.
insane potential if he's used the way we are looking at preseason matches. You don't know what ceiling he can have.
Yeah, he's the type of player that could pick up like 20 points, bro, in a game. Because he could pick up a clean sheet, a goal, and an assist with full bonus. Like I think he can do it. And I think he will do it once this year. Like I'm confident at some point he'll pick up like a 15-point haul. Like for sure. Like I just that's my favorite player in the league, to be honest. I know I'm really biased. Like everyone that follows my content on Twitter, on YouTube, like you'll know I'm biased to Trent. But I just think he's one of the best FPL assets of all time. Like he picks up like 150 points with his eyes closed every year. And that's with him missing so many games. Like when he plays full seasons, he's at almost 200 points. So I have to be on him when the fixtures are good. So 1 to 6, there's no doubt he was in my team. So moving on from him, he was a lock, but I've decided to put my Holland money into David Raya as well as Joshua Vardiol. So Vardiol, I think he's a luxury player. You don't need to be on him personally. I think that like with City start to the season over the first 6 weeks, like the fixtures are mixed. They play against Chelsea, they play against Arsenal, they play against Newcastle. I'm not sure how many clean sheets we can get from them, but it's just the attacking upside of somebody like him. In preseason, he's playing in the center back role, but that's because, Ake and Ruben Diaz are not back yet. So I'm going to assume that Pep is going to look at what he did at the end of last season and say, hey, I'm going to put Vardiol in these attacking positions because that's where he can go express himself. We've seen what Cancelo has done in a similar role in previous seasons, like picking up like 15 to 20 clean sheets and 10 attacking returns. So like his ceiling is gonna be like 30 returns. Like Vardio can genuinely do that if Man City keep the clean sheets. But unfortunately, they kept Ederson. I'm not a fan of Ederson personally. I think Ortega is better. It would have been better for Vardio if Ortega would be in net, but that's okay. So, but either way, I just think as my differential when I'm looking at other players and other teams, they've got like a 4.5 defender, maybe like a Livermento or like an Anderson or maybe even a Mikolenko, but I think Vordiol just has higher access to better clean sheet potential and just has stronger attacking threat in general. I know in preseason it's hard to really judge that because of the positions he's in center back, but I'm just trusting that he'll pick up more attacking positions. And with Raya, listen, I think that the meta, like when you think about the assets that you want longer term, I think for Arsenal, it's going to be double defense plus Saka. That's personally how I feel. I think they're the best defense in the league, and it's not even close. I think they're like 20 or 30% better than Liverpool, probably 20% better than City, and then they're probably 50% better than everyone else. So I think when you're going for like rotation options, I think you can't really compare it to a David Raya. So some people will consider like a Flecken plus a Johnston, or sorry, Flecken plus a Henderson, like Crystal Palace and Brentford, that rotation. But I think in the keeper position, I just think Raya stands out. Like they picked up what 16 clean sheets last year. He picked up 130 points because I think he missed two clean sheets because at the beginning part of the season he didn't start for them. He also missed both Brentford games. So I think like if you add both Ramsdale and Raya's points, you'd get to 150. And the question I'd ask you is like, why would it change? Because like Rice was integrated at the beginning of last season, and they were kind of trying to figure out the system. But now the system is set in stone. You got Rice that's like the lock in the midfield. So it's like I just feel like with their spine intact with Rice, Saliba, and Raya, I expect them to keep the most clean sheets in the league. And I just think at 5.5, Raya is different than any other premium keeper we've ever seen. Because, with like in previous seasons, we've had Ederson, but I wouldn't really trust him. The only other keeper I'd really compare him to is Allison, but Allison was required to make many more saves. With Raya, you're just buying the clean sheets. So it's going to be 6 and 2s with David Raya. So if they keep the clean sheets, then I'll do well. But if they don't, then I'll probably get destroyed because like Holland will obviously pick up the points, right? So I'm just hoping that I'm able to get points from David Raya and Vario, but Arsenal have very poor fixtures to start the season, right? So one of the questions you're probably gonna ask me is like, what if you just had Allison in that spot? And I'm genuinely thinking about it. It's like, is it worth they're just starting with an Allison over the first five and move to David Raya for game week 6 onwards? That's something I'm thinking about. But it's all about like how many transfers do you want to put into your plan, right? Because there's going to be injuries and things like that that pop up. But for now, I'm very comfortable owning David Raya. I just think, they disrespect how strong Arsenal are defensively, right? Don't you think people are forgetting how good they are?
Yeah, like I said, right, I like teams over fixtures, right, especially start of the season. Everyone just looks at fixtures and think, they have X bad fixtures, etc. I feel like Arsenal are now a team who can keep a clean sheet anywhere, right? We did at Etihad away last year, right? So we can keep a clean sheet any stadium in the league as long as we are doing our job. So, and the good part about Raya is with the change of rules, right? It's really difficult now for the defenders and the goalkeepers to get bonus points, right? So you are buying into the cheapest possible nailed Arsenal defense at 5.5 million, right? Because Saliba is nailed, he's 6 million. White is 6.5, right? Gabriel is again 6. Calforley, I think the guy, Italian guy that we got in, he's again 6 million, right? I was expecting him to be 5.5. So
Mm.
anyone who's nailed in the defense is 6 million, and you are saving that point 0.5 million. You're getting a guy who, anyways, the defense and these are not attacking defenders that we have. So generally, they go for clean sheets, and you're getting the clean sheets with Raya. I think it's a very very smart choice.
Yeah, the thing is that like I just if Gabriel was more nailed for minutes, I would want to be on him. And I think it's kind of innocent till proven guilty. Like for me, I think Gabriel is still better than Saliba until we see that he's rotated out. But the thing is, bro, remember at the beginning of last season, Gabriel was just benched. I don't know exactly what the reason was, but in my mind, it just shows that he's lower in the pecking order than Saliba, right?
He is. I think Saliba is the most nailed defender that we have. I do feel, Arteta won't play around with the Saliba Gabriel, partnership primarily because of
Mm.
how good they are, how well glued they are, right? But you never know. The player that we got in has also played as a left center back, and he's well known to play well there, right? I don't expect that bench to come in at the start of the season, but long term, you don't know. And ideally, I don't like spending transfers on defenders, right? So I want people to, pick up someone. Maybe the next switch I'll do is when the wildcard comes in. That's it, and then move on. And then maybe the next switch I'll do is when the wildcard two switch comes in, right? Because midfielders and forwards, we have so many good options. There might be times where you want to move from one person to another. I don't want to waste transfers on defenders, right? So it makes sense to pick up nail defenders who you know are going to start with there's no question mark, and you just keep playing with them.
Yeah, the question is like it's about that combination, right? So would you go for a 4.5 defender plus a 5.5 keeper, or do you think you're better off with a 4.5 keeper and then a 5.5 defender, right? And that's what the thing is like I don't really like any of the 5.5 defenders. Like I think the Man City ones, there are always question marks over minutes and there's low upside. Pedro Porro, I'm just not a fan of Spurs. I think the bonus points change will impact Pedro Porro negatively because we've seen him so many times concede a goal and then still pick up bonus points and end up with like five,
That's what
six,
happened.
7 points because of the bonus. But I don't think that'll happen that often this year. But Poro has really strong attacking upside. We just saw in his last preseason game, he scored from way outside the box. I did not
Amazing.
expect that. Like his attacking quality is incredible. So Poro is someone I can definitely consider. Like I could even switch my draft up and do Anderson and Pinnock down. I also have point 0.5 in the bank, so I could do Pinnock down to a 4.0 and Anderson right up to Pedro Porro. So I could have Porro, Vardiel, Trent, and Raya. Like I could start like that. But to me, I'm just not a fan of Spurs defense. And I think it's more of a manager thing than it is like a player thing. I love Porro. I just think the coach doesn't have a good backup plan. They're always too reliant on like pushing forward too much. So I can't trust Porro to keep enough clean sheets, right? Or do you
I
disagree?
I agree. I agree. I think the first three fixtures are pretty decent for Spurs. They might get a couple of clean sheets, but after that, it just looks more and more difficult, right? I don't like Spurs defense at all. I like the midfielders. I think that's the only place. If I go there, that's the only place I'll go. That's all.
Yeah, I think the difference between like Poro and Vardiol, like the extra point 0.5 is huge. Like I think if you can find that point 0.5 to get to a Vardiol, the upside is just much stronger. So that's why I've built this style of draft. So I want access to Arsenal, I want access to Liverpool and Man City defensively. And so I'm just picking up the three best defenses. And then with Anderson and Pinnock, I mentioned it earlier, like Anderson is playing for Crystal Palace under Glasner. They were the fourth best defense in terms of expected goals conceded under the new manager. There is rumors that potentially Mark Gahey could leave, which would obviously dramatically change the data for Crystal Palace, and that's where I could reconsider maybe have different sort of options. But maybe if Gahey goes to Newcastle, maybe I could consider somebody like a Livramento if Trippier also leaves Newcastle, because that would leave the right back spot open for them. So definitely going to consider my 4.5 attacking options. I also have the ability to just do Barco up to Livermento, and I could use three 4.5 options and rotate them for one spot. Um, the issue that I have with that is I want to leave myself flexible, right? I want to make sure I have a route back to Holland. Like I can play around and have as much fun as I want without him. Like that's fine. You just have to keep in mind game week like 7, when City's fixtures turn and they're playing against like Fulham, Bournemouth, Southampton, Wolves, you're gonna want Holland in your team. Like he could pick up goal, he could pick up a hat trick in every single one of those games from game week 7. So I'm just conscious of like making sure to not move too much money into like areas so I can still get to Holland. So for example, right now I can do Isak and Salah to Holland and a 7.5 because I'm keeping point 0.5 in the bank. So like that, I also have the ability to just not go for Holland at all. I have the ability to do like Salah plus Nkunku to Palmer and Son. I could do that because I could just do Trent down to a Saliba, and I'd be able to get to Son plus Palmer. So I have a lot of flexibility with this style of draft. That's why I wanted to keep point 0.5 in the bank. Keeps my options open to actually avoid Holland long term if we see his conversion rate low. But I mean, we'll see. I mean, I'm sure he'll pick up like a brace versus Chelsea. Like all this talk is nice, you know. He gets the
Yeah.
brace versus Chelsea, and then he gets the hat trick versus Ipswich, and then I'm like way behind the field, you know.
It's definitely a high differential draft, right? Extremely risky. I think most of the top owned players today that I see in the game are not there in your draft, right? Be it midfielders, be it but you have a good team, right? So I don't look at ownership a lot, especially at the start of the season, right? At the end of the day, you want to create a good team, and it seems like you do have one, right? You have good defense, you have good midfield, and you have a decent forward, right, base, right? That's how it looks. We are definitely past, the time that we had earmarked for this episode, but there are some
Uh,
questions coming out for you, right, Kanji? So let's start with a question on rate my team from Diablo, right? Where he has a defense of where he has a goalkeeper of Henderson and Fabianski, a defense of Van Dyke, Livramento, Van de Ven, and Barco and Howard Bellis. He has a midfield of Salah, Eze, Saka, Rogers, and Winks, right? Your fourth and fifth midfielder, and then he has a forward of Haaland, Wood, and Isak. So basically, he's going for a 3-4-3. I would assume, right? Three forwards are there: Haaland, Wood, and Isak. Midfield, he has Salah, Eze, and Saka. He managed it with a Rogers, I guess, playing as a fourth midfielder, and he's gone really, really cheap defense. He has a 6 million defender with Van Dyke, followed by all 4.5 million guys, right? So you have Livermento and Van de Ven, I guess, starters, right? Ultra heavy on the attack, right? He has picked up Haaland, Salah, Isak, Saka, Eze. Not bad combo, right? But extremely low on the defense, right? How do you rate it?
um, I think it really depends on how much he's locked on Van Dyke. Like, because I think it's okay to have that amount of attackers. I just think having Van Dijk there, it doesn't really feel right. I know Liverpool have the best fixtures, but I think you would be better off spreading the Van Dijk money, spreading it into Harwood Bellis, Barco. I think if you go with this style of draft, I think you just got to go all in and have 4.5 options in order to just like rotate them and have good enough like fixtures that you can be targeting. I think Livermental is a great pick. If you like Van de Ven at 4.5, I think he's a great player. Like I genuinely think he's a great defender. Not sure how good he would be in FPL for getting attacking returns, but at 4.5, you're buying into a good team, right? So I get that. I think Van Dyke down to maybe like a Munoz. Listen, I like Anderson and Pinnock. I would genuinely consider that as a rotation, and I think that would give you an extra 1.0 to spend on the Barco spot. You could even consider upgrading a Rogers to a differential mid, like maybe you could go for like a Hudson Odoi or a Harvey Elliott or even like a Smith Rowe at Fulham or an Andreas Pereira on the penalties at Fulham, given their easier fixtures. So if you're not locked on Van Dijk, I would split the money and upgrade the depth of the squad. What about you?
Definitely agree. I think you can move out of Van Dijk, right? Go for a 5 million defender, and use that money to make it slightly more, wider, right? Primarily because it helps you cover more bases, right, at the start of the season, and slowly once you see things, understand, by game week 3, game week 4, you can make your moves and maybe take concentrate your money towards a player. If you really like Liverpool defense, maybe Van Dijk is a play. Is Konate your second defender by any chance?
Um, I think potentially it would be Kwanzaa plus Konate would rotate in that right center back role. So I would just avoid it completely. I think the assets to really think about would be somebody like a Simicast if Robertson is going to be injured to start the season. He's
Yeah,
currently missing preseason, as well as somebody like Connor Bradley if we see Trent play in midfield.
perfect, perfect. Uh, we have the next question from Ben, who really wanted to ask you about Arsenal defense. He said, "Why don't you go triple Arsenal defense?"
Yeah, bro. Honestly, have you considered like owning like double? Like, who do you think are the three best Arsenal defense? Like over the course of the whole season, if you could set and forget the best picks, like who do you think the three best Arsenal would be?
I think it's Saliba, Ben White, and Raya. Right. As of now, I have not seen the Italian guy play. He does look like someone who has an eye for goal, who will move closer towards it. But I like Saliba for his surety minutes. Right. I think he didn't miss any minute last season for us. Yeah, he played the highest minutes for Arsenal. Right. And Ben White is fairly similar in nature. Even when during the preseason. Arteta didn't touch him. He let him play at the right back. I think his partnership with Saka makes it so vital that he continues to play in that place,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And then you have Raya primarily because of you buy into Arsenal defense at 5.5 million, right?
Yeah. I definitely have my eyes on like a differential defender for Arsenal. Like if there's an injury to someone,
Yeah.
Like somebody, like let's say Ben White gets injured, or maybe even Timber gets injured. I think being able to get to that differential defender that's nailed could be really good in terms of FPL points.
Timber is someone I'm looking at. I don't think he starts, and even Arteta said, he wants to ease him in, given he's coming back from a serious ACL injury, right? But towards the mid of the season, we can look at maybe he's coming into the game and picking up someone else's place. He can pick anyone's place. The quality is really good, right? In that case, I would really consider. But uh, while our defense is so good, I really love our attack as well. People forget that we still score like 85 goals odd, right? And most of it comes from the wingers generally, right? So players like
Mhm.
Saka, or even I feel like Martinelli at 7 million is very interestingly priced, right? If he picks up form like the season before, he's a 180 to 200 pointer guy at 7 million, right? So these are the players. So ideally, I don't want to take three players. Even if you are really strong on Arsenal defense, I won't go past two. I would always keep that one slot free for who comes out, right, and pick up that guy.
Yeah, I think personally the best three is just going to be Saliba, Raya, Saka. I generally don't think it's really a question. You just have nailed minutes. You're getting the best of both worlds. Double defense plus Saka. It just makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I agree. Perfect. Thanks a lot, Kanji. I think we had a good session, right? Forwards are an interesting part of the game, but it was good to see your draft as well, your thought process around, how you're playing the game, right? I love taking risks as, as a manager myself, like I was talking to you earlier, right? Uh,
Mhm.
there might be seasons where you have a lot of misses, but then there is once a season where you can really explode, and it's all
Yeah, like
about
you
following
told
your
me
own
that.
conviction.
Yeah, you told me that you finished in the top 500 before. That's incredible. I don't even think I've ever been in the top 500 before for even 1 week.
Yeah, so
So
I
that's
did
amazing, man.
355, couple of seasons back. It was an amazing run, but it was all about having fun, playing with your gut, right? Having, looking at all who are the good players who people are not picking. I'm like players like Bruno Fernandes, right? He has low ownership, but is a strong quality guy. I, I, I I punted a lot on those guys. I in fact captain, I think Ronaldo was playing that season, and he was my
Wow.
differential captain for a lot of weeks, right? People used to keep on going for Salah, I used to go for Ronaldo, and he used to give me points, right? So something like that. So I
Wow.
love seeing drafts like this. So happy to see it, and really good to connect with you as well, right? Hope we keep in touch and pod more in the coming season.
100%. Thanks for inviting me, Sankop. All the best, and I can't wait to come back sometime soon. Can't wait to see your draft soon sometime as well. Once you're locked in, you know?
Yeah, of course. Thank you guys. Thanks a lot for joining in. Right. See you again for the next episode.